times and seasons. God uses times and seasons to pinpoint a purpose. And we will go through this, we'll go through a couple more dates, and we'll look at these dates later on. You're going to be surprised at what they all point to in regards to the future. These dates are sort of the birthday of something that's up and coming in our future, or in the future of this day, and in the past of our day. So we'll look at that in another study. So let's go to verse 13. Now this is an overview of what we've been reading. On the very same day, Noah and Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and 3 wives of his sons with them, entered the ark. See, they voluntarily went in. They and every beast after its kind, all cattle after their kind, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth after its kind, every bird after its kind, every bird of every sort. Man, it was a zoo. This must have been loud. They probably had, all the zoo over on the other side of the ark or something, or down below, but it wouldn't have been any problem to kind of keep the noise down, but you couldn't keep smell out, that's for sure. And they went into the ark, listen, to Noah, 2 by 2 of all flesh, in which is the breath of life. The writers are assuming you understand that was the unclean, and 7 of the clean. So those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him. I love this. And the Lord shut him in. Man, I love that verse. It's God who shut the door, which I have to assume if God shut the door, only God could open the door. So I'll tell you what, when God shuts the door, you be secure. Noah and his family were completely secure. It was God who shut them in. And that's amazing to me, because we read Jesus speaking to the church of Philadelphia. He goes, I have the key of David. He who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. But to those who were on the outside, the season of grace was over. They chose to reject God's best. So, God, in essence, sealed Noah's redemption. Does that sound familiar? If you read your scriptures, it would, because Ephesians 1:13 tells us, in him you also trusted after you heard the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation, in whom also, having believed, you were sealed with the Holy Spirit of promise. Your redemption has been sealed. If you have placed your faith in Jesus Christ, your redemption has been sealed. And that's assuring to me. The Lord has sealed our salvation, saints. You saints. We're shut in there. Now, I can't wait. This Wednesday we're going to talk about how Noah and his ark typify Jesus Christ and his salvation. Amazing stuff. I'm looking forward to that. But let's go ahead and finish up verse 17. Now the flood was on the earth 40 days. The waters increased, lifted up the ark, and it arose high above the earth. Now, can you imagine being inside that ark? There weren't little portals to look out of. So you couldn't see what was going on, and suddenly you're in this big, huge ship. And suddenly you feel this moving around and stuff. Hopefully you didn't get seasick, But you just start moving around, and they knew something was coming down. And aren't you glad that it was the Lord that shut them in? Because if man tries to shut himself in, there's going to be a leak somewhere. But not with the Lord. Not with the Lord. The waters prevailed, verse 18, and greatly increased on the earth, and the ark moved about on the surface of the waters. Oh, this must have felt bizarre inside. And guess what? There was no navigating tools or anything. You just had to go with the flow. You just had to go wherever God was taking you. There was nothing you could do about it. You were completely in God's hands, and I can't think of better hands to be in, by the way, when you're in a flood or in a storm in your life. To be in the hands of the Lord. The waters prevailed, it says, 15 cubits upward, and the mountains were covered. So Arafat, in the mountain range of Arafat, somewhere between, or Ararat, sorry. Wrong news story. Ararat is over 16,000 feet. So the water exceeded 30 feet over those highest range mountains there. That is a lot of water. And I can tell you this, it's those who want to believe in a local flood, this chapter is shooting holes all over it. This was a global flood to the max, to be sure. The waters prevailed 30 feet above, and the mountains were covered, and all flesh died that moved on the earth, do you think? Birds and cattle and beasts and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and every man. So there were no survivors. All in whose nostrils was the breath of the Spirit of life. All that was on the dry land died. So he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping thing, and bird of the air. It was a fulfillment of prophecy. God said it would happen. They were destroyed from the earth. Only Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained alive. And I think this is interesting. 8 souls were saved. 8 is the number of new beginnings. Isn't that interesting? And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. The Jewish calendar was 30 days. So this is 5 months. Now I've seen the devastation in New Orleans. I don't know if any of you went down there when that happened, but I think they were underwater a week or so. And was it about a week or so? 3 weeks. Okay, I couldn't believe the devastation. Now imagine 5 months. I'm telling you, trees, everything was uprooted. Everything. Because the fountains underneath were breaking up. The topography of the earth was changing. That's why you're never going to find Eden, because everything was changed. The directions of the rivers and everything had been totally changed. The landscape had been totally changed to the max. Matter of fact, if you read in Psalm 104, I'll just read that to you. It tells us that was the deal. In verse 5 says, "You who laid the foundations of the earth so that it should not be moved forever, you covered it with the deep, as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they fled. At the voice of your thunder they hastened away. They went up over the mountains. They went down into the valleys to the place which you founded for them. You have set a boundary that they may not pass over, that they may not return to cover the earth." The idea is that as the earth was covered, God was formulating a new earth down below. And so as things began to drain and recede, the earth was completely new in its landscape. All things were made new. Now, some people would say, man, this just seems to be like a really brutal way to wipe out an earth. Not really. Not really, because studies tell us that drowning is quick and painless. Drowning is quick and painless. How many have come close to drowning before? Okay, kind of scary, isn't it? And I remember one time I was under, some kids were playing and they were kind of, typical fish your head under and hold it under and all that in the pool. And I remember they were getting a little bit too much, and I remember there was a moment there where I thought, I'm not going to make it. But I wasn't afraid or anything. There was just a calmness about me, but I just knew I'm going to go up some water, and that's the end of it. And then finally they let me out, and I gasped for air and stuff. But they've done studies on those who have gone through this. There is that initial horror, obviously, of not being able to breathe and struggling to stay above water and everything. But once you go down and gulp a few gulps and breathe in the water, you pass out. Man, that's merciful. God's a merciful God. He didn't enjoy watching this. But these are the folks that said, we don't want God. These are the folks that were mocking Noah. These are the folks that said, you're all wet, Noah. You know? And now, suddenly, when it's all said and done, they're realizing, it's true. But when they went down, it was quick and painless because God is a merciful God. Now, what do we get out of all this, folks? Well, what does it tell us? Noah walked with God. Noah worked for God, and Noah waited on God. You and I get to do the same thing. Right now, because of Christ living in us, we can walk with God. By placing our faith in Him, we are made righteous. And now we work for God. And now we're waiting on God. We're making preparations. I hope you're doing that. What do you mean? That you're preparing for eternity. Not that you're shutting off the things that you're doing in this world, but are you preparing for eternity? Because it's coming real fast. I can't believe how gray I'm getting. It's just happening so fast. I saw a picture, a side shot of my head, and I was like, am I really that gray? I mean, I still feel like I'm in my 30s, man. I got blonde hair. Not anymore. I mean, it's just going really fast, and I'm ushering into eternity. If I'm fortunate, I have 30 years. But after that, then what? Then what? You get all your stuff, then what? You have the big fat bank account, then what? You get all your material possessions and you have all this stuff and you sit back and you have 5 years to enjoy it and you visit the hospital a few times and you're dead, and now what? This is what we're talking about. Am I preparing myself for that day? He may come in our daytime. We're seeing as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man comes. And when you read the description of what's going on in Noah's day, sure sounds like our day. So I go, should I be wise and be able to tell myself, you better start preparing your ark. You better start building for eternity, not about this life. Because if you're living for this life, you're going to find yourself completely empty. Now, it's true for us, especially as parents, we need to live for our kids. We need to be focused on the affairs of this life. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm trying to instill in my kids to live for eternity, not for this life. It's not about the next new iPhone, folks. Okay? It's bigger than that. It's not about the next new toy that's coming out in the market. It's about eternity. And it's going to happen, and it's going to happen really fast. Faster than we want to admit. So Jesus, and here's the thing, because I know many of us, Jesus told us this. He said, in this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. You're going through some flooding times right now, and so am I. Stormy times. Well, this is what Jesus had to say. Whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on a rock, and the rains descended, and the floods came, and the wind blew and beat on that house. You ever feel beaten by floods in life? But he goes, and it did not fall. Why? It was founded on the rock. The words of Jesus. It's more than just hearing them. It's doing them. That's wisdom. But then he says, but everyone who hears these sayings of mine, this frightens me, who hears these sayings of mine and doesn't do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rains descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Because when you're building on your own ideas, they're always bigger than you can handle. And when they fall big. And this is the problem. It's not just about hearing the Bible. It's not just about reading your Bible. It's about doing what the Bible tells you to do. It's listening to the words of Jesus and doing them. It's not just hearing about it. It's not just listening to Christian music. It's not just listening to Bible teaching. It's doing what Jesus said. And how do I know that I'm founded on the rock? Well, how do I handle my floods? How do I handle my storms? Is it all God's fault? Is it? Is it everybody else's fault? Do I get mad? Do I quit being in fellowship? Do I